Hello everyone. Today I wanted to show the first step in one of my favorite ways to oil paint. This is going to be a Grisaille method of painting, meaning that we're going to be doing a black and white underpainting and then we'll glaze the color on top of it. This method was used in the past before tube paints were readily available. Paint pigment was really expensive, and this was a way to paint without using nearly as much pigment. Only after tube paints became available did direct painting, where you paint directly with the color you want, become popular. So for my painting today, I'm going to be using titanium white and raw umber. I personally like to use an earth tone, like raw or burnt umber, instead of black when doing an underpainting, because I just like the warmth that the umber provides. I find that black is just too cold for my preferences. Now, here's my canvas board. I've prepped it beforehand with a few layers of gesso to get the texture I want. Then I painted it with a shade of acrylic paint because I really enjoy working on a toned surface. You're welcome to paint just on a white canvas if that is what you prefer. Also, to make it easier to light and film this video, I took a picture of my reference yesterday instead of painting from life, and I've printed out a copy. Since the printed version isn't super high quality, I'll probably need to refer to my computer screen once I get a little bit more detailed, but for now, this print will work out fine. So, to begin, I'm opening up my liquid, which I obviously have not opened up in a while since the lid is super stuck, but once I get that open, I will just be getting a little dollop with my palette knife and putting it next to my paints on my palette. You really don't need too much liquid for this. It depends on how large of the painting you're doing and how much liquid you typically use. I won't even probably use half of that for this painting, but yeah, you'll be able to tell how much liquid you'll want to use as you paint more. The liquid does dry faster than your paints, so that is something to keep in mind. I usually try to err on the side of getting too little, so then I don't waste too much of it. But once you have your palette set up, just grab a brush, and I like to get a little bit of the liquid on my brush and then mix it in with a little bit of paint. For this stage, I'm gonna have my paint pretty loose, so I used a fair amount of liquid, and I'm just going to be sketching out the pear on my canvas now. You are welcome to use a charcoal pencil to sketch out your object that you're painting. I am not too worried about this one since it's just an exercise and it's a pretty uncomplicated reference. So I'll just be going straight in with the paint to kind of sketch out the object here. If this were something that was more complicated, I probably would want to use my charcoal pencil to draw it out so that I'd have the chance to erase and really get it how I want. If you saw my drawing videos on where I used that pepper, you will know that I was much more technical in those videos in trying to get, my picture looking exactly like my reference. I'm clearly not being that technical here. I am redrawing these lines, not trying to erase them in any way. It's just a little bit more lax because I'm not trying to look exactly like the reference. This is why I typically like using organic things as references if I am just doing these kind of quick exercises, because something organic doesn't have to have a specific shape. I don't have to get this pear looking exactly like the pear in my reference for people to still be able to very easily recognize what it is. If you are doing something that is more mechanical, like your phone or just something man-made, it has all these right angles and these straight lines that is really easy to tell if you get that messed up. So I would highly suggest, if you're a little intimidated by oil painting, to pick a really easy, simple reference that won't be too distracting as you're trying to figure out the paints as well. So here I've blocked out where my core shadow is, and now I'm just filling in that shadow shape with some of this umber. The paint I grabbed isn't a ton of paint, and it's pretty thin. You can see I'm kind of scrubbing out to the edges of the shape that I'm filling in. This is why my brushes take quite a beating, and they don't last typically long because this really damages those bristles when you scrub it against your canvas like this. But this is just kind of the method that I use in painting. Really, really thin layers of paint. I usually wait for them to dry in between working on paintings, and that's kind of a slow, tedious process. There are other ways to paint that don't involve, all of this, and so I'm just showing you my method. If that's something that you don't want to do, that is more than okay. That's the wonderful thing about painting, is you can really figure out what works for you, and if it makes you happy and makes a beautiful painting, like, it doesn't matter that you didn't follow somebody else's rules. So feel free to break away from this instruction and really do whatever you want. But I'm just showing you my method for it if you don't know where to start. So I'm blocking in that cast shadow shape as well, and just laying down all of my darks. Now that I have all of my darks put down on this painting, I will grab a new brush and get some white. I like to use different brushes for different colors or different shades, just so I don't have to like clean out the single brush that I'm using over and over and over, because that gets old pretty fast. So, sometimes I'll accidentally get like 10 brushes that I'm working with all at once that all have different shades or colors on them, and that can get a little overwhelming too. But for this, where it is just an underpainting, you just have white and you just have a dark tone. It's pretty simple, and it saves you a lot of time in washing brushes. So I am just spreading out this kind of white value into all of my lit areas on this pear. I'm using much of the same method, really thin paint, scrubbing it out. I am going into my dark shape though. I'm not stopping at some edge. I'm really carrying that white into the shadow shape and trying to blend out where the light and the shadow meet, because I want that edge to be really, really nice and soft, and that will help it to look three-dimensional on this two-dimensional surface. And so I know a lot of beginner students they'll put down their dark shape and they'll put down their light shape, and they won't bring them together or blend them out, and it will just look really jarring. It'll be really sharp and strange looking. And, if that's your approach, if you're trying to make something look very stylized or abstracted, awesome, go for it. However, if you are trying to make something look realistic or like your reference, then you'll really want to spend some time and blend those tones together and make them really, really nice and soft. So here I'm coming in with a really dark value, and I'm going to start adding in some of this shadow that's, I guess not shadow, background to this pear, to get this edge of the pear nice and sharp and really define what the shape of this pear is. Because right now it's just kind of like an ovalish blob on this canvas. So I'm going to be darkening up this background to really make that highlighted side of the pear stand out really nicely. That is what it looks like in my reference with that dark behind there. I'm not going to be worried about putting in, the lines of the cardboard box or anything. I'm just kind of do what I want for the background. Whatever makes the pear stand out the very best. Because it is an exercise, I didn't put, effort or thought into the background of my reference. So I'm going to deviate from it in that sense. But I do want to make sure that this edge is nice and clean and a really, really nice sharp contrast to the very, very smooth, soft edges that are inside the shape of the pear. Those core shadows you want to get nice and smooth. The edges of your pear you want to make really nice and sharp and clear. If it is, a highlighted side up against a shadowed background, you really want to make that pop. If that's where your focal point is going to be. So I'm adding in this background. I added some highlights on that stem there just so that would stand out a little bit and not totally get lost in the shadow. And now I will just keep trying to clarify the edges of this pear and make its shape a little bit clearer. Here I am adding in some more white to strengthen these highlights a little bit more, brighten them up. The paint I'm working with is getting a little too thick to be able to like scrub it up to the edges without, you know, lifting up all the paint that's underneath it. So I am trying to be a little bit more gentle with this blending, which is a little bit difficult with a bristle hairbrush like this. So if I really wanted to smooth this out well, I'd probably grab a softer brush to blend with. But just trying to bring up these highlights a little bit before I call it quits on today. I usually will reach a point that if I am just kind of pushing paint around and I'm lifting up the paint underneath and it just gets difficult to work with, that's usually where I'll put down the brushes and I will take a step back. So as we come into this time lapse here, I quit painting and I let it dry, and so I came back the next day with it dry and I was able to put even stronger highlights on top. And I brought the lights into the dark shadows of the pear, and then I came back in with the shadows and came into the light. And it's really just this back and forth when I paint of lightening up all the lights and then darkening all the darks. And it's, yeah, a constant back and forth as you're trying to find where those values are and get those values as true to life as you can, because that really is what makes your picture pop, is when you get those dark darks and those light lights and you blend them into each other really nicely. So here I have my finished underpainting. It is still pretty rough in some places, and it's obviously not like a nice finished painting that I'd put on my wall, but I'm not too worried about that since this was just an exercise. However, I have made my values very clear. I have my highlight, mid-tone, core shadow, reflected light, and cast shadow. The painting is totally finished in terms of value, and that's what you want to have before going into glaze with color. So now that my underpainting is done, I'm going to let it get totally dry for a few days. If you try to glaze color on top of a painting that is wet at all, you will end up destroying the underpainting, so you want to be pretty patient before going to the next step. So once mine is dry, I will make another video and go over how to glaze some color onto this painting. Thank you so much for watching.